really appreciate everyone taking the time this morning to attend the panel. Just to get everyone up to speed, this is part of our Pay It Forward initiative, where a group of people who've sort of been through the startup journey or have been part of companies before came together to help the community in some way or the other. We've shortlisted, a number of startups that are going through one-on-one mentorship program. And in parallel, we have these learning sessions that we're conducting on a regular basis, to help the larger community. This is our second learning session. The first one that we're starting with today is, on early stage product management, which, as Amit rightly pointed out, is an oxymoron. So we'll sort of dive into it today a little bit. And then after this one, we have another panel at 11 a.m. I'd love for folks to stick around and join for that one as well. That is focused on go-to-market strategy and market sizing, where we have Karan Bajaj from White Hat Junior and their investor, Pratik Poddar from Nexus Venture Partners joining to talk about White Hat's early stage journey. How did they think about their go-to-market strategy, how they thought about the market size there. And truly, that was a question mark at that point. So I think that'll be a very interesting session for a lot of founders who, at the early stage are still sort of figuring out what market they're in and how large it really is. So thanks once again for everyone for joining. We'll kick off our first panel on early stage product management, and I have Amit Ranjan, Deepak Abbott, and Mona Gandhi joining me today for this panel. Thank you everyone for doing this on a Saturday morning. I love to kick off panels with an icebreaker, as I was saying earlier, just to lighten things up a little bit. And what we'll do is we'll go around the table and get everyone to introduce themselves. And what I would love is if you could also add an anecdote from your product journey where you didn't have data, you didn't speak to any customers, you only had a gut instinct, and you took a leap of faith. And I'd love to know how that turned out. Should we kick off with you, Amit?
Sure.
So your introduction and then the anecdote, please.
Sure. So, this is Amit Ranjan, and by way of introduction, so I was part of the founding team at SlideShare. And SlideShare, we started in 2006, and we had a very successful journey, got acquired by LinkedIn. And as you might be aware, SlideShare has now been acquired by Script just a couple of weeks back. In 2015, I actually moved out of SlideShare, and in a strange quirk of fate, I actually ended up working for the government of India as part of the India Stack team. And more specifically, I've been involved with the DigiLocker project that Mighty is building. And, in terms of the anecdote that, Harsha is referring to. So let me dial back to 2006. And this was maybe 6 months after the launch of SlideShare. So I think the product had been launched. A lot of people have started using it. And I think something we did at that stage that really helped us change the trajectory. And it was a pretty risky decision. I'll quickly explain what I mean by that. So we noticed that a lot of users essentially used to take the embeds from SlideShare and they used to go and put it on their blogs. So we started seeing hundreds and hundreds of these embeds coming up all over the web. And obviously they were a great thing for visibility for SlideShare. And one of these days, our CTO, Jonathan, he had this real brainwave. He said, you know what? These embeds that are going out of SlideShare, they are all essentially just an object. There's a JavaScript object with the slideshow player. What if we actually encapsulate that object in HTML? So just surround it with an HTML and put a link back to SlideShare. And we thought that this was kind of a great idea, but it was also risky because it depends on how Google kind of looks at it from a SEO perspective. But nevertheless, we went ahead and we did that. So from that day onwards, once we implemented the feature, any embed going out of SlideShare was not only the object, the slideshow, but it also had an encapsulated HTML pointing back at SlideShare. And what that did was, over a period of a few years, you had actually millions and millions of these links pointing back at SlideShare. I can say with some degree of confidence that this was a SlideShare original idea, and pretty much the entire web copied it. You started seeing every other site do it, and because we knew it was a risky thing to do, many years later, almost like 4 or 5 years later, we actually got contacted by Google, and they said, okay, this seems interesting. SlideShare is doing something which we need to look further into. And they actually talked to us, and we actually explained to them what we were doing. And their question was, so is this construed as a natural user action? And our point was that yes, it is. It is very much a natural user action. But they actually, took a slightly different view, and they gave us a manual SEO penalty. But by this time, the job had been done. We had like these millions and millions of embeds, as I said, and pretty much all the sites on the web had copied that feature. So this is an example of what Harsha is referring. You kind of really this is just a intuitive idea. There isn't really much backing it, but you go ahead and take it. And finally, in our case, it worked out fine. Although I'm sure there could be many other examples where it's not as smooth as that.
That's a very interesting one. And was it designed to be a hack, a growth hack? Was that the purpose?
It was a growth hack, and it was a pretty risky growth hack, as you said.
Yeah.
And but by the time we kind of Google caught up with it, by the time
the job was done.
The job was done.
Very interesting. Awesome. Mona, over to you.
Hi guys, thanks Harsha firstly for doing it, and amazing initiative. I think having been in the Valley for a while, I've definitely seen a lot more initiatives there related to sharing and entrepreneurs sort of learning from each other. So it's good to see it here as well, and people doing it more openly, especially now that there's a little bit more time because you don't have to commute anymore. So it's good to kind of utilize it more productively. So thanks for doing this. Hi guys, my name is Mona, and I have been at startups all my life. This is my 5th startup. I have funnily, I've been at startups very early stage in all of them, and but they've each been in a very different vertical. So first was in like a blogging space, the other one was in social media advertising, the third one was in publishing, the fourth one was Airbnb, and then now I'm a founder of a company called Appraised. We're a platform, we're a full stack platform focused on the candidate, helping them with career transitions. Starting with product management, but any type of career transition, basically. So yeah, that's a little bit about my journey so far. I've always, like I said, always been in startups. I have a funny story, and it's not related to growth, or it's not related to any sort of product per se. I was the product. So I actually left Google on day 4 of my orientation because I wanted to join Airbnb. So in the 4 days from when the acquisition was announced, and then the earlier company that I worked at was called Apture. Apture was a contextual search engine, got acquired by Google, and now what you see as Google Web Search is what Apture had built. I was actually going through my orientation at Google when the common investor between Apture and Airbnb introduced us, me and the co-founder of Airbnb, and he somehow convinced me that Airbnb was a better idea. This was like back in 2011, the team was less than 30 people. And literally there was no data, there was nothing. I was just an early user, and I really got super excited working with Nate, who's the founder. And I just basically took a super good decision. There was a lot of money that I left on the table. A lot of people told me it was a stupid idea. But I just anyways went with it, and it kind of felt like a very stupid idea early on, because the week that I joined, we had the worst trust and safety case. I stayed in the office for the entire week. Someone's house got vandalized, and I was just like, damn, I don't know what I was thinking about. This is like so stupid. But in hindsight, it turned out okay. But that was like, I think one of the biggest decisions I've made in my life, just purely on gut. And like not on data at all. Like if I had looked at data, I probably would not have made this decision. So I'm kind of grateful that I went with my gut.
Very interesting. It's a personal anecdote, not a product anecdote, but very relevant. Nevertheless, that a lot of the times gut calls work out, and it's not so bad to just go with that, right? Yep. I kind of sense flavors of that in Amit's story as well. Deepak, over to you.
Hi guys, this is Deepak. I am currently building a product. I started my own startup about 3 months back. But prior to that, I was with Paytm for actually I spent two stints at Paytm. My first stint was in 2012 when Paytm was just taking shape, 8 years back. Yeah. So I worked there for 2 years. In between, built another app called Smart App, and then I went back to Paytm. So I've seen Paytm to different versions. Early version was where we were transitioning to mobile. It was still web only product, and then we in 2012 we took an early call to focus purely on mobile, and that was way too early because India hardly had any Android phones, and we only were building for Android back then. And we also had an iOS app, which I think we had less than 100,000 iPhones in India. So those early days. In fact, prior to Paytm, I was building Android games for like 4 years. So I had a bit of experience on working on Android. So when I joined Paytm, I think my only aim was to take Paytm to smartphone, and thankfully that worked out because those early days, we had those free run, right? There's hardly any app in India which we were competing with. It was like a uh, blue ocean where you could do a lot of experimentation. I remember that on Facebook when we started advertising initially, we used to get app installs for like 1 rupee, 2 rupees,
Yeah.
and very high retention, hardly any uninstalls. Uh, Kindly, I mean, if you talk to any founder today, who are building apps, they know that uninstalls, retention, these are big issues. Back then, we didn't have any uninstall, like less than 5% people uninstalling, literally 100% retention rates. I mean, because even when those days people were downloading apps, they didn't have much apps on their phones to play with, except of course few social apps. So Paytm was one of the Indian apps that they downloaded, and they always even though the usage was less because we were doing only mobile recharges, that was once in a month or maybe twice in a month use case, but our app was still always on the phone. I think at Paytm, we do a lot of experimentation. Paytm actually thrives on a lot of experiment. They have this culture where we try out a lot of things, and thanks to the large traffic that they get, everything that you try, you get data early on. But when you start, you just take a gut feel and just start building. Having said that, obviously, majority of the products at Paytm are backed by a lot of research and data. But one example that comes to my mind, it's not about Paytm, it's about the product I was building in between my two stints at Paytm called Smart
Hmm.
App.
Hmm.
It was a data saving app, a data management app. These were pre-Geo days when data was very expensive and trying to save data for Indian users. So it was primarily an Android app because Android used to give us a lot of data about what apps are you using, whom are you calling, what time of the day you're using the apps. And then after about hitting million installs, we were kind of wanted to experiment a bit and thought, okay, why don't we do the same thing on iOS as well? Even though we knew that in India, you know, uh, the kind of utility that we build may not appeal to iPhone users. They are not really bothered about saving data, or they're mostly on postpaid, or they're not really looking at every minute or every bit that they spend on their phone. We still built the app, and then one fine day when we saw the app, said, this app technically has nothing to do with Indian users. We can actually launch it globally.
Hmm.
And it was a very simple app. It was just tracking your data. How many MBs are you using in a day? That's it. It was doing nothing else. I said,
Hmm.
okay, why don't we just launch it globally? And we translated the app using machine translation in 7 languages: Chinese, Japanese, French, few other languages, and just launched it. And we were like really surprised that in about weeks time it was hitting 5,000-6,000 downloads a day. And we got excited early. Obviously, I think one thing which in early product management I have learned, that never get excited too early. But we thought, okay, we've cracked something, and we got greedy. We made the app paid. It was kind of a stupid decision that let's try and make money out of it. So the app was costing about $3. The moment we made the app paid, it started hitting almost 1,000 downloads a day. We started making 3,000 dollars every day, and we didn't know what actually is happening because we had absolutely no clue why people are downloading this app. We had absolutely no clue why a Japanese guy or a Korean guy, who are not worried about data, are just, downloading our app. And then we realized that, we've uh, kept the app so simple that anyone who's downloading the app, they're just seeing one thing, that how many MBs are they using in a day. And that's when I realized that, if you build a product which not even solves a problem, I would say, keeps it very simple. I mean, when user doesn't have to think that why they're downloading this app.
Yeah.
uh, I think the virality of that product is far better than a product that, we in our mind conceive a complex product that I want to build something which is, going to change the world. So yes, obviously, the idea was to evolve the app to a stage where, it actually starts doing a lot more. But then obviously, that didn't last long. It lasted for about 5-6 months. And we saw that 100 other such apps were, hitting the app.
You're a rich man, Deepak. That's something that if you're getting $3,000 a day for 5-6 months,
So
you're
we
a
made
rich man.
$100,000 in first month.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow, that's incredible. Okay. I really thought that story was going down. Like when you said we decided to turn on payments on this and decided to monetize, I thought he was going to say we stopped getting any down.
When it was a free app, no one was downloading it. The moment we made it a paid app, people started paying for it. I don't know why it happened, frankly.
Very interesting. Wow, wasn't expecting that. Amit, I guess my next question is for you, since you tweeted about this last night, and I thought it was a good way to also kick off a deeper discussion on the topic. You rightly said that early stage product management, just as a term, is an oxymoron, right? And how early stage is really like a drunken walk.
Right.
Would love sort of to double click on how would you describe the difference in how you went about building the product in the 0 to 1 journey compared to, let's say, 1 to 10 or 1 to 100, right? What changes in the process, right? Would love to deep dive into that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think what you are essentially doing in the early part of the startup journey is that honestly you're just trying to throw stuff at the wall and hoping that some of it sticks. And the moment you see evidence of something sticking, then you try to kind of orchestrate, okay, how do I kind of make this better? How do I grow this? And so I'd imagine this is true for most products, like most startups, most teams. That's how they get started. And look at just Deepak's story about, this app that they built. It exactly kind of fits into that description. And the best way to kind of visualize this is obviously, so trace the path that a drunken man takes, and you'll realize that initial on you're just trying to kind of balance yourself somehow, and once you get in control of yourself, you start walking straight. And as you start walking straight, you sit up, you're uptight, and you have a real mission, and you have a certain direction. And so it kind of is a visual imagery if you were to conjure up what that journey or that path looks like. I will also state that same thing in a slightly different way. And this is something that we saw that as part of the SlideShare journey is, I think all of us have heard that startups are all about the art and science of, building things from scratch. And what you see is that in the early part of the startup journey, in the 0 to 1 or maybe the 1 to 5 stage, a lot of what startups essentially are doing is actually far more artistic. They're trying to kind of do something somehow, and they really aren't going into structured product management, right? Product management is a set of tools, techniques, processes. It's a structured way of thinking. And that's not what most teams typically end up doing in the early part of the journey, right? You get to the structured part of building products only at a slightly later stage. So think, 10 to 50 or 50 to 100, that phase. And personally, if I were to look back at my SlideShare journey in getting acquired at LinkedIn and then working with the LinkedIn team, that's exactly the way I would describe it, is that a lot of what we did in the early 6 or 7 years prior to the acquisition was still largely art. Once we were acquired by LinkedIn and we went inside that organization and we saw the depth and the sophistication of their execution. So for example, just to kind of give it a more specific thing. So LinkedIn is an amazing company at data. Like if you look at their data team, they have different species of data engineers. They have data scientists, they have they have analysts, like 4 or 5 different species.
Yeah.
And the level of sophistication that a company at that scale has, there's no way that a startup, in the initial part of the journey can even hope to achieve anything like that, right?
Yeah.
So that is where the tweet that I put out in was kind of trying to point towards that. In the early part of the journey, what you realize, what you see actually is that product management does take place, but it is very unstructured. It is very informal. Often the people doing this is either the founders themselves or some of your early engineers, or it could be a designer who has some product sense, or a combination of some of these.
Yeah.
In most teams, you really don't have, quote unquote, the product management professionals coming into the team and kind of doing it. That only kind of happens at a slightly later stage. In the early stages, you're obviously trying to build an MVP. You are trying to just kind of go through a series of iterative processes. But in the later stages, that's when structured planning and that
Yeah.
stage kind of kicks in. So
Yeah.
so this is the thing to understand, is that whilst product management as a discipline does kind of show up throughout the startup journey, but in the early stages it is far more intuitive, it is far more unstructured, it's far more informal. And as the organization, as the team, as the product kind of matures, that's when it kind of starts becoming more structured. And that's been the experience that I've had.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm glad you said that. I've often seen at early stage, where people, there's so much available on the web and you can learn so much about just how to build products from the web. But the reality is that a lot of that doesn't work at early stage, and that a lot of that doesn't apply to the 0 to 1 journey. And I felt like it's important to call that out. And thank you so much for sharing. Mona, you've also seen Airbnb go from, very early days, less than 30 people on the group. You were there for 7 years, so you've seen them scale tremendously. Did you see the company also transition? And, let's double click a little bit more on the 0 to 1, right? How were you taking product decisions at that time?
So I think one of the most important differences I think that I want to that I have learned through my Airbnb journey was that, people talk a lot about how 0 to 1 is more gut driven and it's art, and there's less sort of structure to it. But I think that if you go one level deeper and kind of peel that onion, I think what essentially that gut is kind of driven by the fact that you're more closer to the user and you keep talking to the users more frequently because you don't have the scale. So you can't really look at numbers. For example, early on when I joined, we had like 8,000 hosts. We have over millions now. And so with those 8,000, we just had to figure out what was working, what wasn't working, and where were the gaps and what are some things that they needed. Because without building that supply, we were not getting the demand. So we just had to fix that problem. And so although it was art and it was driven by gut, I felt that in the very early stages, we were super, super close to our users. We had a set of people that were just our ambassadors because they loved the product. They were willing to get on a call at any point in time. And they just they told us anything and everything they wanted. And that made life very easy for you as somebody building the product, because it gave you direction on where to go. And then you added that insight with some more level of gut on like, okay, in the priority of what we are really good at, where can we actually excel, right? So our strength is we are tech driven and everybody else in travel is non-tech. So how can we leverage tech to do a bunch of other stuff, right? And so I think a lot of 0 to 1 journey, I think is, how good of a job do you do getting insights from these users, and how do you actually multiply that with your own sort of understanding of the problem statement and what you are uniquely suited to do, right? Because ultimately every company has some level of a DNA, right? Like if Google tries to do social all the freaking time, they just keep failing because it's not part of their DNA. And similarly, like, Facebook tries to do search, it fails too. So I think there is this, I think it's important for founders and early stage employees to be very clear about what they are really good at, and then kind of use the user insight to kind of multiply on it. That I think was very, very clearly different between, going from 2011 to 2013. that's when we actually kind of hit the tipping point in the marketplace on Airbnb, where there was enough liquidity on both sides, supply side, demand side, and they were kind of starting to grow organically. The first 2 years was really, really challenging because every time we built supply, they didn't get demand, they would churn. And then every time demand came and then didn't find supply, they would churn. And it was just like a constant battle of like, every morning I remember I used to wake up and I just see two numbers, like how many people have churned on the demand side and how many people have churned on the supply side, and just talk to them on why did they churn, right? So it was just like a constant. So I think it is art, but I think that art is not just pure gut of one or two people. It typically, at least in my experience, has always been kind of pushed and more importantly, like driven by the end user. And I think it's very similar for us, even at Appraise right now. There are people that are looking to do career transitions. And a lot of what we've built right now has been based on our conversations with them. The challenges we face in making career transitions today, and what are we uniquely suited to solve. So how can we do that? So I think that's the one key difference. And then I think when we went like 2013 to 2015, when we started to actually grow internationally, we had different sets of problems. We were a product team based in San Francisco, and our users, where the growth was coming from, was based internationally. So we didn't actually understand the problem statement completely. We weren't in the market to fully experience the problem. And we really struggled like the first half of 2013, 2014. And then that's when, one of us was like, actually, we should just go stay in the market and talk to these users for like, 2-3 weeks at a stretch. We should live that to know what the problem is. For example, sometimes because our app is so image heavy, we were just like, publishing amazing pictures of every host and every listing. People that didn't have good internet connection, the app would just not open. And you're like, why are they churning? Why do they open the app and leave? That's only because we're looking at random data, but we don't actually know what the user experience is. So we ended up as product managers between 2013 and 2015. I've literally been a resident of no country because I have just been nowhere for 180 days. We were just constantly traveling to the markets, we're constantly talking to people. That's when it was sort of in the middle of 1 to 10 journey, where we really have.
I think one thing that I'm hearing from you, Mona, a lot is that is user feedback plays a very, very big role, and your gut is not just in your head. It's bases these conversations with a number of users. You are taking into account users who are on your platform as well as users that are churning, not just those who are using it. And you're using that collective input as gut. And I think another takeaway that I'm having from what you said so far is also that this is not just the first 1 or 2 years, right? That this is going on till 4 or 5 years at minimum in the journey, and probably even beyond that.
And that's actually the point that I wanted to say, that what makes Airbnb special and what makes Airbnb what Airbnb is because they never lost touch of the user. Even today, the attempt is always, how can you make host a partner instead of host just a user on the platform, right? So that mindset has always been there, and I think that's what makes companies really special. The other point that I want to say,
if you don't mind, Mona, I want to take this point that you said and push a question to Deepak. We've heard from we're hearing that you need to take user inputs, and a lot of your gut is determined from that. The question that comes to my mind is, where is that balance, right? How do you decide what input you take and what you don't take? Right? Where can you sort of get digressed? Is there a framework that comes to mind, right? Like the framework can be basis goals that you have, and that's the other big question, right? How do you even decide what your goal is in the early days, right? What are you chasing? What are you going after? So would love to hear your thoughts, and this aligns with some of the questions that I'm seeing on the Q&A panel as well. Ankush Rajput has asked, and then Kanchan has asked a similar question around how do you decide between gut and data? And when do you start taking user feedback? We've answered that. And then I guess the question I'm asking you, Deepak, is there a framework, that helps you decide what feedback you take and what you don't take?
Right. So I think, like Mona said, talking to users always helps. But sometimes, when you talk to a lot of users, you get to hear their issues or their needs. They cannot give you solutions, right? So it is, end of the day, a product manager's role to actually find a solution to their problem. Because if you build what consumers actually want, or they narrate to you, chances are that you'll actually be building only for that user. I mean, you'll have to look at all the users that you are targeting, and use your product management skills, use your experience, use your uh, gut, and of course benchmarks from other products, and see can you build a product which takes all that feedback, but not necessarily solving for a particular user. Because what initially is that uh, early days when you're building the product, that you're trying to solve one problem. It is going to change maybe a small habit. For example, at Paytm, when we are building mobile recharges earlier on, the competition was offline, right? A user would go to any shop and do a recharge, and when they go to a shop, the advantage that they used to get was that they'll ask a shopkeeper, "Koi naya plan aaya hai kya?" Right? Because most prepaid users would have this issue of understanding these thousands of prepaid plans. So the idea was that if you're changing that offline to online habit, while we can say it is convenient, you can do it 24 hours a day, but people still had to take their debit cards out, right? Credit cards out. It was not easy early in 2011, 12 to get them to pay online. So how can we solve that small problem, that the feedback that they get from the shopkeeper when they're recharging? So that's when the idea of recommending a plan based on the usage comes in, right? Our shopkeeper doesn't know that this user is a data heavy user, gets a lot of incoming calls, does more STDs or ISDs. That's something they don't know. They'll just recommend you a plan which they think works better for everyone, right? That's where the product management will come into the picture, saying, okay, I know that users are uh, doing a recharge, and they still go offline because they find one small utility. Now
Yeah.
how can I bring that utility online, right? So
Hmm.
the point I'm trying to make here is that you look at those small problems that you're trying to solve, and find very
Yeah.
simple solutions to that, right? I mean, it's because there's no, like I said, there's no silver bullet. There's no one solution which
Yeah.
can solve problems for all the
Yeah.
users you have, right? There'll be still be some users who find it comfortable going to a shop, or who find it doing it offline. The idea was
Yeah.
that keep it just very simple initially, and
Yeah.
then when data comes in, when
Hmm.
first 1,000 users, they leave either a Play Store review, or they send you a ticket, or they leave a negative review. Then you start building for the next set of users, because that's what early users, like you say, early users gives you a lot more insights than
Yeah.
next users, right? First 10,000
Yeah.
users are the most important one. The current startup that I'm building, we already have 72 negative reviews, 72 one-star reviews. The kind of
Hmm.
learning we got from the 70 reviews, I think, is more priceless than my last 20 years of product experience, because now I know that what I need to fix, what I need to build for next 3 months, for next 6 months.
Very interesting. I love what you said, Deepak, when you said that you're not looking to find out what people want. You are looking to find out what problems they're facing. And you're trying to build towards solving a problem and not building towards whatever it is that people want. And that's a big trap that I think a lot of people fall into, is if you start building for what people want, either you will build for that one person who wants something, or you'll end up trying to build for everyone who want like 10,000 things. And you're really looking for what are the common problems that you're hearing amongst this group of users, and building for that. I mean, the question for you, taking off from here, is how do you even decide which problem again you want to solve, right? Is there a
Yeah.
North Star metric that you go after, or a North Star goal, right? So when you look back at your early journey at SlideShare, what was your North Star, and how did you decide what it is that you're chasing?
Yeah, so this is the holy grail of product management questions, right? So what exactly are you trying to chase? And I will tell you that at SlideShare we did something that was again a little bit on the riskier side, but we pretty early on, once the product had kind of started getting used, we kind of took a leap of faith, and we said that I think distribution, engagement, monetization, all are important, but at the stage at which we are right now, we kind of wanted to bias the product more towards distribution than towards engagement. And it was a very conscious call, and it's also a debatable question. And I can tell you so many reasons why, in a different context, it would have been the completely wrong decision to make. And in fact, I would even modify that statement a little bit. What we essentially did was, it was a hybrid metric, um, lying somewhere in between distribution and monetization. And here's what I mean by this. So distribution is typically, growth of users, page views, and whatever. And engagement is obviously people interacting deeply with the product. So we kind of came up with this thing. We said, okay, you know what? The real thing that we are trying to kind of focus on is not just growth of users, but it is growth of users who are, completing a certain core action, right? So it's not just growth, it's growth of users completing a core action. So it kind of, bridges the gap between the distribution and the engagement. And we defined what that core action is. The core action for us was, somebody comes to SlideShare, we get that person to sign up. Immediately after signing up, we get that person to upload a piece of content. We take them to the product page, the SlideShare view page, and there the objective is to kind of somehow get this person to take the embed code and go and put this embed code back on their blog. So we very clearly define that this, to our mind, is the golden flow. This is the core action that we want to optimize for. And we actually put a number to it. We said that, okay, you know what, this has to happen within the first 2 minutes or 3 minutes of the user landing on the platform. And then we started tracking this as a metric. And I think we were successful. But as I said, it's kind of one of those things that will bias your product in a certain direction. And what I mean by that is, for example, and this is a quote that our CEO Rashmi used to always say, is that design is all, or design, or even strategy for that matter, is all about making compromises. There are no perfect answers. You win some and you lose some, right? And in this case, by biasing the product towards distribution, we really gained in distribution. SlideShare became a real viral phenomenon. What did we lose? We lost a lot of the metadata, for example. So some of the things that we could have got from users while signing up, details about their product background, about their personal profile backgrounds, or even while they were uploading a product, if you could actually get them to input, metadata like categories and tags. So we just kind of rushed through all that. So the problem that we created was that, we had a lot of users, we had a lot of content, but we just didn't have the metadata describing those users and describing those people, which actually hit us really badly when we came to monetization, because the moment you talk monetization, you actually need descriptors about your thing. So the broad point I'm making is, and the takeaway for the audience here is that, there are no perfect answers. You design is about making trade-offs and making compromises. You win some things, you lose some things, but it is important to know what you're winning, and at some point in time you're going to come back and fix the thing that you are losing. As long as you are aware of that, I think it's a reasonable strategy to adopt.
Very interesting. We have a question. We have a couple of questions in the Q&A section, so I'm going to take them up now. And leading from what you said, Amit, I guess a question for you, Deepak, since you mentioned that you tried monetizing your previous startup, and it was a gut call. A question that we received is, how do you decide, or how do you know if people will pay for your solution? This is a question from Priya Ranjan. Early stage, 0 to 1, you're still, building something out. How do you know if people will pay?
Okay, so like I said, my first experiment with a paid product was a fluke, right? I mean, we didn't know that people are going to pay, but I think one thing we learned later on that, like I said, people need to see that the value that they're getting is worth the money that they're paying, right? So for that, you need to build a freemium model. You can't expect people to pay you without really seeing your product, without really experiencing your product, right? So that's one reason why you see on App Store, paid apps are dying, right? I mean, it's only the freemium model that works, because while I may have $1 or $2 to spare, but I still, or I may read certain reviews, what others are saying, but I still would like to see the product myself, right? So when you offer something to users to experience your product, and that's when you start to get a feeler that, okay, users are liking your product or not. How much time, let's say if it is a time spent product, are they spending time? if it is about completing a funnel, are they reaching that funnel often, or if it is about users inviting other users for some sort of a community, are they how many users are they inviting? So if you start to get those feelers early on, and that your technology is in shape, your teething issues are all taken care of, that it's time to monetize your product. Because if you do it too early and you don't get these signals, and you are not ready on the tech side, you're not ready on the product side, or even on the marketing side, I think it can backfire, right? Because you technically created a gate which people can't climb. So the idea is to get those basic pillars in place, uh, and then build a simple product which, like I said, when people come in, the
Yeah.
first two features that they use, they can get accustomed to easily, and then obviously uh, expose them to the
Yeah.
host of extensive features that you plan to build in future.
Yeah, yeah. Just maybe another input from me. I've seen some companies try out sort of testing monetization. Tactical input is, I've seen some companies just launch maybe a mini version of their product as a separate app, which is paid, just to see if people respond to it and pay. It gives them a good idea of early conversion numbers there. But another framework that I would suggest that you have in mind is you need to think about whether what you're building is a growth hack and a distribution strategy that you will monetize later on, or you feel that it is valuable enough to monetize from day one. Now, if you're not clear about that answer, user feedback is one way to go for it. And the other is, as I said, just launch an MVP as a separate app and see if people are paying, and whether that monetizes. And if it's a growth hack, then wait, hang on till you've figured out retention, that the product is sticky, and then worry about monetization. So that's to that. Question for you, Mona, again from the audience. What are some of the elements that you think an MVP should absolutely have? And there's emphasis on the word definitely or absolutely. What is it that you cannot not have in an MVP?
I think you cannot miss the core action that you want the user to take be missing from the MVP. Ideally, the MVP should make sure that not only are they able to take the core action, but they're able to understand that the MVP is around that core action. So they know the problem that you're solving for.
Yeah.
I think that
is there an example that you can give just to nuance that a little bit?
sure. For example, at Appraised, we are focused on career transitions for product managers right now. Being able to understand what this transition journey will look like, and for them to actually go through, have a clear understanding of how that product is going to solve for it, it has to be part of an MVP. It's not something I can explain later and just expect more people to just kind of sign up, right? Similarly, for Paytm, if recharge is the core action, when they open Paytm, there should be an easy way for me to recharge in the MVP itself. It can't be I'm just showing you, different plans, and then, three versions later, I'll let you actually recharge. So I think that core action has to be part of the MVP, because that's what you're testing. You're testing whether people are willing to take that core action using your product. So I think that's number one. Number two is, I think having clarity on, who your target audience is, at least for the MVP, is important, because it's not easy to, the product is unknown. People don't know. You need to know who you need to reach out to, so you can actually focus your effort, and you also don't have too much bandwidth to go after everyone. The other reason of having a understanding of the target audience is to also know how valuable their feedback is, because if you go broad and you get feedback from everybody, then there might be very likely slightly different feedback, and you don't know which one to value or which one to not value, because you don't know who your target audience is. So I think if I were to crystallize three important things for an MVP, I think knowing who your user is in the very early stages, making sure that your core action is something a user can experience as fast as possible, and then being able to measure whether that experience is driving value for that user or not, right? So that you know whether you want to build on it. So I think these would probably be sort of the most definite I would have in the
Very well summarized. Very, very well summarized. Thank you so much.
One of the things that
Go ahead.
I have always looked for in MVPs is fulfillment. The word fulfillment, where the user needs to actually feel satiated. I mean, just the way we eat something, and at the end of it we feel satiated. We feel, yeah, you know what, we had something. I think that catching the element of what exactly constitutes that fulfillment, and if
Hmm.
and or not the user is kind of getting that feeling. I think it's a key part of the MVP.
Yeah. Amit, the question from you for you again from the audience. Sorry, I'm pointing it at you. Is how do you think about competition and defensibility in that early stage? Do you even worry about it at all? Do you incorporate that into your design? I think specifically this question on defensibility is a critical one, because I think if market is competitive, in my opinion, that's a good thing. It means you're building something that a lot of people felt is useful for your end user. But I think the question on defensibility is a critical one. Is that something that founders should think about from day one?
Yeah,
And how, if
yeah,
yeah.
my personal opinion, and this is not just while I was running my own startup, but also as observing other startups, is that I see founders kind of split along two axes. So one axis is where people say, you know what, I'm going to be focused on my product, my users, and while I'll look at competition as some kind of a benchmark once in a while, I'm actually not going to let them dictate my strategy. And the other axis is where people say, okay, you know what, we don't exist in a vacuum. We exist in a place where there's multiple people trying to kind of target users and build offerings for them. So we just can't afford to have a very uniquely inward focused look. You have to be kind of looking at the market, at competition, what others are doing all across. And then you see this second lot is actually, a lot of their actions and strategies essentially kind of, is far more collectivist in nature than the
Hmm.
individualistic. In our case, I would say, we probably fell into the first bucket at SlideShare. And to my mind, taking a step back and going back to the example I was giving earlier, is that, there are no right or wrong answers. The thing to know is that any strategy you take, it is going to win you something and it is going to make you lose something. As long as you realize that, this is happening, and at some point in time, I need to come back and maybe, kind of focus on the other thing that we are missing. I think that's the way to kind of think about it.
Yeah. Yeah. I just want to give a heads up to our audience. For our first panel right now, we have exceeded time. If the panelists can stay on for another 5 to 10 minutes, I can cover a couple of more questions from the audience. And what we are planning to do is we will make a note of all of these questions along with folks who've asked them. We'll summarize the answers from our panelists, and then we'll publish those answers on Twitter and LinkedIn for everyone to follow. So watch out for that, but we will make sure that we get to these answers. Even if we can't cover them in the panel today, you will hear from us maybe in a day or two on Twitter or LinkedIn, where we'll publish answers to these questions. Another question that I want to take up is, let me see. Okay, this is a good one. Generally, in young companies, engineering bandwidth is limited. So how do getting a slick UI, great design is not in your control. You don't have the people or, in fact, the time to do it. How much importance should one give to great UI? The question is on UI when you're building the product. I'm glad the question is not about UX. So, but I would love for the panel to answer both questions, right? How important is UI and UX in the early days? Deepak, do you want to take this up?
Yeah. So yes, I think I faced this challenge about 3 months back when we were, building our app. We had just one designer and we wanted to do a lot of things, but I think we decided that UI is important. I wouldn't say it is not, but is it important for your first version? I would say yes, but it all depends on how you look at UI. So we went with all the native elements. We didn't use any library. We didn't use any function for which we had to spend time learn how that function works. No animation, uh, no fancy things in the app, just simple UI. And we realized that that simple UI actually worked better than the other three versions that we built, right? So I would say that early on when you're building, you can ignore UI because that's the first experience that users get with your app, because they're not gonna transact with your app immediately. They're gonna spend some time. Or if they can't go through a couple of screens and find it easy to navigate, I think you will actually get misleading data. You might have built a good product, actually trying to solve a decent
Yeah.
problem. Your UI is not supporting that. You may get disheartened by a poor retention or high uninstalls or very poor conversion on your funnel. So I would say that no matter how constrained you are on your bandwidth, put a little focus on, not little focus, a decent focus on UI as well. Do not ignore UI. Well,
Any
UX,
other?
that's an ongoing thing that you can't perfect on day one.
Yes. Yeah, I agree. That's a good point. Any other inputs on this one?
Yeah, I think there's this running joke, right? If you're really proud of your product in the first version, you probably waited too long to ship it, right? So I think with every iteration, it keeps getting better as long as I think the usability of it to solve that core problem is there. I think you should get it out the door rather than just trying to make it prettier and prettier and prettier, because there is no limit to like, there is no such thing as the best app or the most beautiful app. Like you can always make it.
Yeah. I think to Deepak's point, like you want to make sure that the UI is presentable, that it's not shoddy. I think it also affects trust if it is shoddy. Right. But you definitely, again, to Mona's point, you don't want to spend too much time perfecting it. You want to get the job done. And that experience of getting the job done should be good. It need not be great because, we have hopefully 7-10 years to keep perfecting it. So awesome. Guys, there are a ton of questions here, and I genuinely don't think we'll be able to cover them. So we will make a note of all of these questions, as I said, to our attendees, and we will publish the answers to them in a day or two. In addition to all our attendees, I will be putting up a link for a survey for this panel as well as our next one. The next one will start at 11 a.m. Please take the time to give us feedback. We have another learning session coming up in a couple of weeks, and we would like to, make it better and more useful to all the attendees. So please do take the time to give us your feedback. Thank you so much, Amit, Deepak, and Mona, for this extremely fun and extremely insightful session. I wish we could have more time with you. I think our attendees would have seriously benefited. I would have benefited. But maybe for another time. And thank you so much for doing this today.
Thanks, Asha. Thanks for doing this.
Thanks for having us.
Yes, thanks for having us. It was fun.
Thanks everyone.
Bye.
Bye. To all the attendees, I'll just be publishing the link for our survey. Please take the time to fill it in. This link will be on the chat panel on Zoom. Just a heads up, our next panel is with Karan Bajaj from White Hat Junior and Pratik Poddar from Nexus Venture Partners, who will talk about White Hat's journey, and cover specific points around go-to-market strategy and market sizing, especially in the early days. And in a lot of category creating companies, you will see that market size is unknown, and we'll be asking some of the tough questions around how do you build confidence when you don't know the market size, how does an investor build confidence when you don't know the market size, and then truly when you're creating categories, how do you even decide what the go-to-market strategy should be? So we cover some of these questions specifically from White Hat Junior's journey in our next panel that starts at 11 a.m. I'll repeat, we've published a link to the survey. Please take the time to fill it in. It'll be immensely useful for us to make these sessions more useful for all of you. Thank you.
Hi, Karan. Hi, Pratik. Thanks for taking out time on a Saturday. Really appreciate you guys taking out time. So the idea is pretty simple to get your thoughts on go-to-market and market sizing. We have a bunch of startups who are looking forward for this session. We've kind of populated a few questions, and we'll start off. So Karan, I'll start with you. Want to ask you more about what was the genesis of the idea? How did you go about thinking White Hat Junior, and why did you start White Hat Junior? Can we start with that?
Sure. It's a little different from the go-to-market strategy, but the philosophy behind White Hat Junior was actually very personal. When I had my own kids, I'd kind of reflected a little bit on my own life, right? And I'd found that there was a very clear demarcation in my life, right? Around age 28, I'd written my first novel, right? And in the last 10 years or so, after that, I'd seen that after like building something for the first time, like which was a novel in this case, I'd found that my life had turned very profound, very experimentative. You know, I wrote one novel, then wrote another novel, then took a time off to do yoga meditation. I kept like experimenting, creating, etc. And much of the constructs that had kind of guided my life before that, right, were like money and what will people think and this and that. All of that fell away after I started building stuff, right? So I when I had my own kids, I always thought that they should be creators, builders. That's the center of the universe. And then coincidentally around that time, I'd read this kind of like research from MIT around coding as a playground, right? On how kids who code early, they have this very profound psychological shift that happens in their mind that look, I can build stuff in this world, right? Because they start to put one or two things together, they start to create something out of it, and they start to have this idea that look, everything in the world is an object created by someone, and I can create it too. And so I thought that like my kids should have that feeling very early. It took me very late in my life to have that feeling. So I was like, okay, let's kind of like create this category, right? And that's how I jumped in, right? So the profound idea or the profound kind of impetus was that kids would become creators early. They would start to think of themselves as builders early, right? But then the go-to market was obviously very different because I knew that in India nobody would pay for making their kid a creator, right? So I knew I had to go to the market in a different way. Yeah.
Karan, when you were thinking about this idea to a large company that we see today, um, uh, I'm sure people would have told you that probably the market is very small. Like you said, will people pay for it? Two things, right? So how did you go about building conviction on this? I know it started with a personal need for you to build this, but how did you start building conviction on this? Can you tell us more about that, Karan?
Yeah, so my view on market sizing is quite different, right? I feel like if you have one paying customer, even if you have one kind of authentic paying customer, not your friend or something, but somebody who found a need, then I guess the question is not whether the market size is big enough or not. The question is how can you create this category? So what I did was my kind of view generally is that if you have an idea, it's very easy to launch it very quickly, right? So if I remember, the idea came to me not too far away. It came in August of 2018. So that's actually just 2 years ago exactly, right? In August of 2018, in the first week of August, the idea came to me. I think within 2 weeks, I put a landing page up. I was still in my job that time, right? So I just put a landing page up and I just directed a bunch of people. I just told my wife to put it on her kind of mom's groups and stuff. And then I just, the first employee of the company actually, who wasn't even an employee at that time, was like a friend, and she, I told her to become a teacher, right? And so the first kind of version of the idea was really 2 weeks after the idea even came to my mind, and we had a landing page up, and a bunch of people got it, and then immediately after that we had the first paying customer, right? Because they like like the first few paying customers immediately. So after that, I knew that really, if there are paying customers already with a kind of rough landing page and like a teacher who's just doing some lessons, and I can create it into something which could be significant, right? So my general thought process is that like, if you have an idea, just launch it, it's very easy to launch it. And then immediately after that, I kind of built the conviction after like 5-6 paying customers came, and I went to Nexus. I think I think entrepreneurs are celebrated, but what's not celebrated too much is the kind of the people backing the entrepreneur, right? I would say Anup, Pratik, I met them with just the thing that, look, I can do this. And I think they took a very big leap of faith on just it wasn't even probably a basic PowerPoint slide, Yeah.
Nice. So Karan, so did you ever start working on a market sizing? I remember when we started working on market sizing when we were building Bounce. So did you actually do that working calculation of saying that, okay, this market is few $billion big or something like that? Did you guys do that work? And when did you do that? Because the idea itself started in August 18, and now we have already seen where White Hat Junior is. Right. At what stage did you do that math? As in, did you ever do that math, or it was just that conviction that, okay, this is there will be a lot of paying users, let's just focus on that? Or did you had to do that math?
I mean, I got a guy on Upwork, to like, it was very like, see the thing is that I knew that like, if you present an idea, you can never present it. You have to present it as $1 billion idea, right? So I just got a guy on Upwork and said, look, what is the top 15% of population in India, US, etc. You know, very basic kind of like a thing, and just got it. Like so, there was no right, and the kind of the analogy I used, which I think, you know, I think again Nexus, I'm sure, didn't buy the market sizing, right? They bought the, probably, I mean, you should ask Pratik that, right? The analogy I used was like, I basically said that, look, I have done a prototype, which prototype was really one landing page and like a mom's post on my wife's Facebook group, right? I've done a prototype, and this is the, I have like 20 paying customers, right? And this is the profile of the paying customer, and I project it across India and US. It's at $10 billion, right? So it was as like you know, basic as it gets, right? And that's what I took as market sizing.
Nice, Karan. Let's get Pratik's thought on market sizing, and how was he thinking when Karan first pitched White Hat Junior to him. Pratik, your thoughts on the market sizing, particularly when it comes to White Hat Junior. What was running in your mind? Were you always excited about it when the first time you heard the idea? Definitely, it was Karan pitching, and we all know Karan has done multiple things and it comes from a very diverse background, right? Right from writing novels to yoga to everything, right? So, what was running in your mind when you were looking at this market? And could you also share your thoughts on generally when someone pitches to you, how important is market sizing for you, and how does it start in your mind?
Yeah. So thanks Vivek, and thanks Karan for the plug. Uh, you know, it's amazing how entrepreneurs think, because it is coming from inside. So it's very conviction driven, right? You don't need to justify yourself. When Karan is talking about it, Karan is so obviously seeing the market, obviously seeing that it will work out. But as we are coming from outside, so we need some more conviction. We need something to see, something to visualize. And so from our perspective, of course, when we first met Karan, day one, and my colleague Anu convinced Karan to take our money, and we were glad that we could get him to accept that. Now, the question we were asking then, though, was is it a rich people thing? And it's a fair question to ask. Karan because he's coming from coming as a consumer, he's coming as an entrepreneur. It's obvious that he can see the market size, but from our perspective, it's not as obvious for sure. Now, when you do any top-down calculation, you can justify the numbers by saying so many people, so many kids pay so much money in the school. These kids should be willing to pay for this activity. But unlike many obvious markets, so like Bounce Wake, it's an obvious market. There are 200 million commuters every day. Even if you capture 2% of it, it's decent enough. It's good enough. In Karan's case, it's not as obvious. I think, of course, it finally boils down to the founder. Karan, when he was first explaining the product as well, you could see that he is creative about thinking it. You could see that the way he's thinking about the problem, he can convince the other party to try the product, and he can sell his vision to the parent and the kid. Second thing is, he's internally believing and passionate about the problem. Until the entrepreneur internally believes in it, he will almost surely not be able to create that market. So this is truly a category creation game, and it has to be coming from the founder first, because until the founder believes in it, the employees do not believe in it. So that founder first conviction is very, very important. Now, at a meta level, many good companies that we have been able to be a part of, a lot of them to begin with have low market size as an outsider. I think the answer typically lies in the fact for us that majority good technology platforms, because they will increase accessibility and affordability, the market size will get created. Today, when people think about coding, are people not thinking about going to coding because it's difficult to find, difficult to think about it, there's no trusted brand, or are they not thinking about doing it because there is no demand at all? So I think it boils down to the founder. Karan was able to convince us of that story. And when you, again, even in this 2 minute of conversation, you can see the passion and the drive, and that helped us convince ourselves. And again, I think a lot of it is it's outside in perspective. At the end of the day, when you have that chemistry and you want to work, then you try and rationalize yourself by giving those arguments that, hey, the market size could be there and he'll be able to create it. if there's no chemistry, if there's no belief, then you end up making the opposite argument.
So Pratik, if I'm hearing it right, do you think whenever it's a category creating kind of idea that someone is pitching to you, so the conviction, the way you can build conviction is more from the founders' confidence in the idea or founders' conviction in the idea. Am I getting it right, Pratik, or is there anything more to it? Will this apply to all category creating ideas?
Yeah. So of course, see, there are more boundary conditions I would keep. So one constraint I keep for myself is the founder working on one very deep problem and trying to solve it very, very well. So if it has to be a very focused, very, very detailed and detail-oriented approach towards one small problem. If you think about it, White Hat, even at this scale, has not really experimented with 5 courses. And that's a great thing, because you just need to make sure that your customer comes out of the class saying that that this was an amazing experience. And we talk about it in Nexus. Our friends in US have said positive things about White Hat in random groups, despite knowing that it's an Indian company or Nexus is an investor, or it just the sheer customer love has to be there, and it will only happen if the founder and the team is totally focused on delivering that one value prop very well, and then expanding from there. The second thing I think about is, in general, my bias is that it's difficult for people to change habits. So it's difficult for you to get customers to shift from one solution to another. But in expansive markets, it's perhaps easier to create categories. So in this case, there is online education boom. Coding as a category is expanding, and I would actually think coding not as coding generally. I would think of coding as higher order thinking, and the need for higher order thinking is expanding. These two are important constraints in my mind for the founder to be able to create a new category. And I always like the argument we always give is there a wedge in the customer's mind, and after that can you expand? And again, when you're talking to Karan, you'll realize that everything is about that customer, everything is about that excellence in that small delivery. It's not about saying that we'll do everything and we'll and this will also happen, that will. It's just very focused, which is very important in these markets, where because that that the complete alignment of forces will happen only if that is there. You're on mute, Vivek. Yeah.
Zoom does have some bugs at times. Yeah. So Pratik, we heard from Karan on how we jumped into the idea, right? So I think that is the founder's way of testing out things, right? You have an idea, you probably talk to your friends, and then you would want to quickly try out the hypothesis and jump into it, right? To know everything around what you've been thinking. You would want your first paying customer to be there ASAP. So that is from a founder's point of view. But so is that the right way, Pratik, on all businesses or all ideas? When should a founder start thinking about market sizing? When should a founder start thinking about is this big enough of a market to be there in? Because there are also times when you build a great product, but probably the market size of this is not big enough. So when should founder and the core teams should start thinking about it? How should they go about it? One way is like what Karan said, let's jump into the idea, let's figure out the business of it, etc. But is there anything that you have seen which people usually follow? I know there are no rules, there are no formulas here, but is that something that you've seen as a good practice to have, so that you don't spend too much of time on an idea if the market is very small or something of that sort? So how should a founder go about it according to you?
It's a very difficult question in my mind, and I would lean on to Karan to whatever I say, if that makes sense. First of all, by the way, interestingly, in the last panel, everyone talked about the same thing that Karan did, right? Everyone was saying the same thing, that you try different things. what sticks, then you start thinking about building it into a business. And all entrepreneurs do it. Of course, that those stories are not told enough. The story always starts by saying, by the point that we built it and it became large. But all entrepreneurs do exactly like Karan did. Now, I think one difference. Uh, so first of all, I think if you are solving your own problem, then life is perhaps easier, because then you understand that problem deeply. I think as an entrepreneur, I also did that mistake, and I'm able to reflect on it, that whatever I was working on was never a large problem to solve. But hand on my heart, the problems I was working on, I was trying to get inspiration from a US company and then trying to build it out. uh, I was a cool techie, I was a cool product guy, but I was never trying to build a large business intuitively. I knew that. Uh, now, if you are solving your own problem, perhaps that's not an issue. Second, not all founders, in my mind, think about category creation. That's totally fine. uh, Category creation requires very very deep conviction in yourself. It's totally fine if not all entrepreneurs should have it or want to have it. It requires a lot of creativity in GTM and in storytelling. Not all entrepreneurs would want to do that. So I like you said, there's no one fits all strategy. I think there are few entrepreneurs who think about category creation, and they should run behind their own judgment and conviction. But there are other entrepreneurs who are solving problems that are obviously large, and that's totally okay, because the problems are obviously large. There others have not been able to solve it because they are just difficult problems. So in my mind, it's there's no one size fits all solution. From a VC perspective, I'll define what large market means, because there's no definition of large market in some sense. And I realize that for a large corporate like Google, etc., the large market size would mean perhaps that their stock price should move, or their India revenue should change in some way. So different people have different definition of large. From VC perspective, the most of the largest funds that we have are of the $300 million to $500 million fund sizes. Now, $300 million fund, $500 million fund size, our perspective is that from our successful companies, we should get an order of money out if it's successful. Now that would mean, like, we'll of course be happier if our successful company returns 2x 3x of our fund. But in base case, if it's in the same order, so 50, 70, 80, $100 million minimum, I think it's a good starting point from our perspective, and we'll be very very happy in that situation. So from our perspective, a company, if it cannot be a $200 million company, then it's perhaps a great business, and there are many fantastic businesses that should not be VC fundable. But from most VC perspective of our size, it's important that the market size is commensurate to an outcome of $200 million types, or larger the more better, but $200 million types more. And that in White Hat's case, even when you're investing in the company, we can see a path with Karan's leadership that it will become a multi-billion-dollar company, and that conviction was always there. If we don't aim high, if we are looking at 200 300 million number, then we always really land below it. When you are thinking high, then life is easier anyways. But that's my perspective based on the entrepreneurs I have met and the companies I have built and failed at that.
Nice, Pratik. Thanks. Probably switching gears to go to market. Current question to you on tell us what is very unique about White Hat Junior when you try to put them across edtech companies which are there, and what was your go to market? How was the strategy different when it comes to your go to market? And tell us how you went about building a great IRR driven company, right? As per the news I've read, you were around 150 million ARR. So how did you go about building this so quickly? What was your go to market? Can you share some insights around that?
Yeah, actually, surprisingly enough, like the framework of the strategy didn't change from almost day one, right? So I'm looking at it right now. That same slide that I had presented to Anup and Pratik 2 years ago is the same slide that I'm using now, and we had always built it on three pillars, right? And I'd kind of put it as three pillars at that time, right? I'd said that the first pillar is going to be really like very extreme kid delight, right? So the kid should be just delighted, right? Because the thesis on which the company was created is that when you are building stuff, you are really in your complete self-expression, and you are delighted when you're doing that. And every class that the kid is doing should be a delight, and the projects after class should be a delight, right? So we had one pillar, and actually the second pillar. So the second pillar was that the teachers have to be outstanding, right? And they'll be outstanding if we are able to treat them very special, right? And so we were able to leverage this very wonderful, educated, qualified Indian women who had, due to some reason or the other, had dropped out of the workforce, right? Either they had stopped working after kids, or they were Muslim women who were working from, didn't want to go out, or they didn't want to travel for safety in big cities. There was just like a huge base of like very intelligent, qualified women. I understood that very well because my mom, for example, she was just one of the most intelligent women I knew, and she was an army wife, so she kept moving with my dad all over, and she could never build a career, right? So I was always thinking that, look, there's going to be this huge base of women like my mom who would, who would, if they had the opportunity like this, would just delight the kids on the other end, right? So at that time, everybody was saying the same things, right? One-on-one won't work, and China mein nahi chala or ye wo. And so I was like, it doesn't make sense, right? They're not making any money right now. Like if we are able to create a productive model here. At that time itself, also I had this very clear sense that we would go global. Nobody had done coding for kids anywhere in the world. We would go global. I had some sense of a frame that once we go global, we'll be able to increase their earnings even more. And in some form or the other, all of that kind of played out as we thought. The moment we went to the US, the teachers started to make, right now the teachers are making more than IIT engineers, right? And IM MBAs, right? If they, because of the US, UK, Australia, New Zealand opening up, right? And I always felt that, look, if women in India are able to make that money, then we would always attract the best talent. And there is so many of them, right? And so we always had this thing that, look, kids should be delighted. Teachers should be extremely well compensated. And the margin structure actually has also not changed much. We had 600 rupees for a class in India. Teachers were paid 300 rupees. I was very clear right from the beginning that we would not do any incentives and stuff, because it's very unfair to do incentives to suppliers, then take them off after investors put pressure on unit economics. The supplier has built their life around your platform, right? You just can't take it off. So we always said that, look, we'll work on this. 600 rupees for a student, 300 rupees for a teacher, do packages of classes. And surprisingly enough, we've obviously done a lot of experimentation around those models and made it better and better. But we had a Kaizen approach to this thing, which is kid delight, teacher quality through well compensated, very well treated teachers, and that supply pool will scale. They would make the kids delighted. Kids are the best audience, because if they love something, they tell other kids. 60 to 70% of our revenue came from organic, so that's why we had to raise very little money. Right now, this month, for example, we are we went from 150 million last month to almost 250 million run rate this month, right? We've gone again 60% up. And our cash burn, we are still like the same, right? We still have the same 10 million in the bank that we had raised for Series A, right? So we've because the model was always the same, right? The framework was always the same. The third pillar, though, which I think I want to talk about, which is not talked about much, is the third pillar. We always said was parent value. Parents should see value. Creation वगैरह नहीं चलेगा India में. That was I was quite clear, and that we went quite crazy on, right? We and we, like, I think that's very important, right? I think this question on market size is not as important as what is the entrepreneur doing to create the category. And if I look at it, I was always like that the parents' base need is massive success for the kid, right? And now somehow they said IIT is the way. Let me show that coding is the way for massive success for the kid, right? It's such a simple problem in some ways. So when in the beginning we said coding improves kids' logic 75%, we had all this research, right? It did well. I remember one Saturday night, we had hit our first 1 crore in revenue in, I think, April, May or something like that, right? After launching the product was doing very well. And then we hit a bit of a roadblock, right? Registrations were not increasing. And I remember Saturday night, we were just like, all of us were like 10, 11 o'clock. We were like, no, we believe in this. Something is not working. we just went around the room and said, Ki, look, what do you want as a parent, right? We really went very deep and not very deep, but so very shallow. And right, the answer was everybody wanted their kid to be a massive success. So next day we kind of got this campaign going, CEO at age 11, game developer at age 9, number one app developer at age 10. And suddenly again, we saw a huge spurt, right? Then basically there was another, so we went to probably $50 million run rate on that campaign alone, right? This is just performance, by the way. We've never done above the line until last week, right? It was all pure play. Then again, we hit a bit of a roadblock. Then we said, okay, what do people want? And they want, and we realized that there's a bunch of kids who were making $1 million on YouTube, right? So we said, okay, millionaire at age 11, right? So we were very we realized that, look, the parent value creation has to be, as much as you have a great product, you have to have great category creation happening for the paying customer. And we were always like, look, let's keep the product excellent all the time so that the kids keep pulling it. And the parent push is very slight, right? But we are quite clear about that you have to do that, right? You have to be able to articulate the category in a way that the parent sees value in it. And a bunch of stuff that we did was around that, right? I know people have given flack on the marketing. Sometimes I read about it, but I'm like, look, I mean, there's not even one thing we've said which is not true, right? Like there's not even one statement we've ever made that is never that's ever even crossed the boundary of ethicality, because we've always said that, look, coder at age 8, billionaire at age 21, that happens, right? Now the parent sees value in that, right? They don't see value in the core mission of the company, which is how we've actually delivered the product, which I think is very good, which is coder at age 8, creator for life, right? That's the core value prop. And that's how we delivered the product every day for the kid and the teachers, right? We are so so deep about that, right? That every element of the kid should feel like that they're creative, they're building, that they're applauded for building. But the parent value creation is coder at age 8, billionaire at age 21. So that's what we communicated, right? And that's true, by the way. So we were like, so I think if you're doing that, then I think we just created the category very explosively, right? So everybody was like, yes, I want my kid to be a billionaire, right? And they kind of signed up for a free trial. The go-to-market was always the same, that look, there should be a free trial class, which is done by the same teacher who becomes your eventual teacher, so that there is no quality concern at all, that they have good trial teachers, not good paid teachers. And we just did, right now we do like 30,000 live free trials a day all over the world, right? 30,000 kids from all over the world are doing free trials with us. And predictably, the funnel has always been the same. About 15% of them will become paying customers, right? And we just keep increasing trials all over the world, and the teachers keep delivering them. And, that's how the model works. Yeah.
Thanks,
Yeah.
Thanks, Karan. Karan, it all sounds like everything went well all the time, right? But I'm sure it is not the case always, right? Can you tell us about something which did not work in your go-to-market? You told me that there were not much of iteration. It's still the same slide which worked. But was it so seamless across markets?
No, not at all. I would say the same framework worked, right? But if you look at it, there was a very strong Kaizen kind of approach, right? Which is we felt like we shouldn't leave even a day in the office if we haven't made one of these three things better in some form, right? It was so clear with us in our head, ki, look, every day are we really so we have this dashboard that we look at 10 o'clock in the morning, right? And every day we are looking at it and saying, ki, look, is the class rating improving? So is the kind of the teacher earning improving? And then obviously, is the marketing cost going down as a percentage of revenue? So we are very deliberate about looking at almost I look at about 50, 60 metrics daily, right? At 10 a.m. in the morning, right? And the idea is that that Kaizen should happen daily, something should improve. And if it's not improving, then one of these groups is not working, and you focus on which group is not working, right? Is it the Kid Delight group is not working, teacher, something is not working, and we just kind of dive into it. So I would say the framework worked about Kid Delight, teacher thing, and parent value always worked. But within that, there was just a whole series of stops and starts, daily stops and starts, right? There's just as I said, right, I remember after the summer vacation, when suddenly we were not getting any registrations, we were like, oh, and the first reaction would have been, is this category too small, right? Did we maximize it in the summer vacation? And we were like, no, I mean, the category is big. It's just that we haven't communicated it well, right? There's just been so many stops and trouble. Tech, tech was a big, I was not a tech founder. As you know, right? If you're not a tech founder and you're a solo founder, I didn't even know the difference between tech and product, right? Till September of 2 years ago, you don't know it, right? You just don't know what is a CTO and what is a head of product. And my head was always trying to wrestle, what is this head of product? What does it mean? like, am I not the head of product, right? I could never understand this whole thing overall. So you don't even know these basics, right? So like, you basically to be able to sell tech people, and that too, I was clear it would be in Bombay. You just like, it's just a constant, right? Something or the other is always broken, right?
Thanks, Karan, for being so candid. I still remember our conversations with our investors when they asked who is heading product to everything, right? I can totally resonate early days, etc. Karan, because parents were one of the core buyers of your product because they were the decision makers. Can you share some insight around are the parents same across US and Indian markets, or did you figure out a certain demography that you could go after faster? We have heard, or it's probably not a fact, but we've seen Asian parents being very want their kids to uh, be educated faster, sooner, everything, right? So, was there a particular demography you went after across markets? Because Indian diaspora is everywhere. So, did you focus on Indian diaspora, but who could pay across markets, or any insights on how you went about understanding the parent psyche?
Right. We were a little bit unusual, so I'll tell you what happened, right? So we launched in the US only March of this year, right? So about 5 months ago. Now, the thing was that by that time, the India business had really scaled quite significantly, right? So we knew that once we launched the US, right, just to make sense of the US as a market where I would focus, I wanted that it should be large scale immediately, right? So right now, for example, this month we are doing about $220 million in run rate, and out of that, 100 is India and 120 is the US, right? So US in the last 4 months has just basically doubled month on month. So we knew that we wouldn't want to focus on a small cohort like Indian parents and Chinese parents. We have to make it mainstream. I would say in the US, I was a little bit fortunate that my wife is actually like an American, like she's and I'd lived in the US a while. We made just one tweak in the US, right, from a B2C business. So the only tweak we made after the first set of consumers came was that we realized that the only difference is that parents, they still buy the promise of success. It's same as India. Uh, the only thing is that they want the kids to enjoy the process. So I would say that's the only shift we made, right? A little bit of the communication in India is a bit hypercharged around, like the CEO at age 12, etc. But in the US, we are a little bit like about the joy in the process, right? Because which is actually true in India also. Parents just don't care about it in India, right? In the US, they care about the joy in the process as much as they care about the output, but they do care about the output equally. So
it's a very interesting insight, Karan.
Yeah.
It's a very interesting insight. Karan, we will switch to questions from our viewers. There are a lot of questions. Um, uh, uh, so, a couple of questions that I could pick up and summarize. So, how do you differentiate your product with a lot of products which are available online, like Udemy or YouTube channels which are free? How did you? So, this question, along with how did you go about building trust for someone to use your product and pay for it, right? So, can you tell us more about how did you
Sure.
differentiate this and also how you went about it?
The differentiation was very easy for us because it was a one-on-one live tutoring, right? So all of the other coding products in the market were self-serve, right? Scratch, Code.org, Udemy courses, etc. So all of them were self-serve, right? So this was a one-on-one tutor. And since the trial class was done by the same teacher, part of the pitch was that you'll continue with the same teacher, right? So that was very, in some form or the other, I would say that was very differentiated, right? Nobody was doing one-on-one tutoring, and so that worked very well for us. And trust, I would say, we were really mathematical, right? So I remember this very mathematical line, which I tell everybody to use, right? Which is 100% refund, zero questions asked, same day, right? So we just put it everywhere: 100% refund, zero questions asked, same day. And we were very diligent about it, unbelievably diligent, right? I would tell my team right off the beginning that if a customer calls for a refund, don't even ask why. First refund it and then have a question on why, and put it on a, just be the consumer that you want to be, right? If you ask somebody for a refund, you want it immediately, right? And we would go out of our way to ensure, working with the bank, etc., that the money would reach them back on the same day. So what happened was that some of our 10 out of 10, all the net promoter score, our refund rates have been incredibly low right from the beginning. At a cohort level had been like 2-3%. But some of our best ratings have come from people who got a refund. They told other people that, look, just try this company. They're like unbelievable. They'll just give you a refund if you don't like it. And that just spread, right? So I think that really helped us because there was such a positive cycle about our, like the fact that, you know, you just try them, right? You know, maybe you're not convinced about coding, etc., but just try them. They'll just give you the refund on the same day. And that worked for us very well. Yeah.
Karan, which growth hack or which channel worked really well for you? I'm sure you said word of mouth worked really well, where referrals came in, the kids started talking about it. But which was a channel which worked really well for you?
So we are like
That's one of the
very
questions I can see
aggressive
here.
growth hackers. So we are very, very strong on that, right? The product tech side on growth hacking is very strong. We were very clear that we don't want to do above the line and get celebrities at all till very late. So, so what's happened is that we've hacked the whole experience, right? So what happens is that the moment you sign up for a free trial, immediately after the free trial, automated within 30 seconds, a website is created for the kid, right? So basically, because we just ask a kid, what is your hobby? And if they just say swimming, then there's a website of a fish swimming. And that's, my name is Dhruv, I love swimming, etc. A very lovely website gets created. The kid loves the website. They share it with other kids. Bunch of registrations come through that. We have a referral program that if for every 5 customers that you refer, you get a MacBook, right? The kids love it because the MacBook is built to creation. In the US, we've just launched a referral program, around 50 referrals and you get a Tesla. You know, we are quite solid on this idea that look, just like basically in every touch point that we have with the customer, we like have built in some level of organic sharing, etc. If the kid does a project, they can share it. That leads to more. So we are very like, we really believe in this idea that you can hack your growth to a very high degree. Till $200 million of revenue, we haven't used even one above the line channel. It's all tech, right? Facebook marketing is 30, so about 30% of our traffic revenue is now paid and 70% is organic. And it's all because there's a lot of sharing, referrals, all of that is just built into it. And we just started TV advertising for the first time last week, right? So yeah.
Nice. So I think the trial product and no questions asked refund really worked well for White Hat Junior.
Yeah.
Can I say that?
Yeah. 100%. Same day. Also, that's also very important. Yeah.
Yeah. No questions asked same day. That's what anyone would ask for, right? So there is no hassle to point out. Yeah.
Correct.
Karan, there are a few questions around how did you maintain quality of supply, and also because the trainers were from everywhere, did accent and few soft skills. Did you train the supply side on this aspect? How did you go about maintaining quality while you're scaling? While the growth hacking really worked, supply has to keep up with the pressure of maintaining the quality, right?
Yeah.
So, any insights there, Karan?
Yeah, so the big insight there is, one is that if you you just have to go after a market that is on the supply side, that is that is very liquid, right? And if you're able to have a very liquid supply market, then you're able to choose the best among them, right? So if your supply pool is a little bit shallow, then obviously you'll have to be like, the burden is too heavily on. So we were very clear, right, that we would not go after superstar teacher model, etc. That's been one of the failings of the one-on-one, right? That there's a superstar teacher who commands her own pricing or his own pricing. We, in a way, tried to commoditize supply, right? That there was no particular teacher who was a superstar, right? But obviously the quality was very decommoditized, right? So the thing was that we were fortunate, and we are still fortunate, that all over the world, we went after women right from the beginning, because we were like, internet safety is key. There's a child on the other end. So we never had males. We were like women. And all over the world, I think this is a wonderful supply pool, right? Where, which is very educated, qualified women who who want to have a different work of like a different work profile, right? They don't want to kind of go to an office or and we just had a very liquid supply pool in that. After that, we were able to set a very strong operational process. From the time you apply to the time you become a teacher, it takes about exactly 10 days. In that, you go through a selection and a training, and then your internet is upgraded. All of that is run like a very tight operation. But the kind of the trick is that basically the supply pool should be very, very big and liquid. And then I think we're just lucky that there's just like so many wonderful women all over the world, right? Who are
Yeah. I think that's very interesting insight on how you tackle supply side, right? Because supply can, when growth hacking works, if supply doesn't keep up, the whole thing
Correct.
shadows down, right?
Yeah,
I
correct.
think you guys have done an amazing job on that, Karan, and everything speaks for itself, right, for you. So thanks, Karan, for sharing that. Pratik, I have a question for you. Sorry, we have been pouncing on Karan and asking a lot of questions to him. Pratik, what do you think about a go-to-market, right, for a company? A lot of companies start off, they have paying users, few hacks are working. How important is the go-to-market playbook before raising Series A, and how as an investor would you look at the go-to-market? Can you share some insights on that?
You know, some smart people have told me that you learn from your successes more in VC than your failures, because you need to know the one thing that's done right rather than knowing 10 things that don't work. If you think about it, if you hear Karan talk about it, if you are a kid, you want to be on White Hat Junior. If you are a parent, even in what Karan said right now, Karan is not pitching to a parent right now, Karan is not pitching to a student right now, not to an investor. As a parent, I want my kid to go to White Hat Junior. In fact, as a teacher as well, I want to join White Hat Junior. Like it's so simple. I think like it's not complicated at all. It's so simple when it comes out so clearly. And in the entire conversation for a $250 million revenue company, and a rise booking run rate company, you still did not hear anything complicated, anything that he's trying multiple things. It's very simple, just one thing again and again, just focus on the same customer again and again. It's such a focused story that when you hear something like that, it's just easy to invest, and then you don't ask those questions. Otherwise, if there are multiple things happening in the company, then the investor needs to ask, what's the GTM? Because, hey, I'm not able to clearly understand who's your user, who's your customer. Everything becomes complicated. But in this scenario, it just is it comes out very, very obviously. And you can imagine that if it's coming out obviously now, it would have come out even better then, because then there was no room to be superfluous as well. So in my mind, for most entrepreneurs, at the end of the day, when investors are looking at it, we are talking about mitigating risks. What are the risks in the business? In some businesses, GTM is a risk, but when you have the idea explained so clearly, with the customer profile so clearly explained, the process so clearly explained, then maybe GTM is not the biggest risk. In many companies, it is. If for example, there are many I don't want to talk about in many spaces. You might argue that product building was easier, but the most important risk was can you get your first customer, and can you excite them for your product? Can you even tell a story in a consistent manner and a coherent manner that the customer would understand it? In such markets, investors might want to get those risks mitigated. In this case, it's actually really about the founder, his aggression, his attention to detail, his creativity, his focus. It's all just that. So in those cases, perhaps not as important. I'll share this simple small story. I got a call from a reasonably successful founder once that he wanted to talk about White Hat, and I didn't know what White Hat was. A reasonably largest company, so he could not angel invest almost surely. So why is he calling? And when I had the call, he said he was asking if his son should go to White Hat, and that was the first time I ever pitched White Hat as a customer, as a salesperson. Right? I never did that, and I had so much fun in that conversation. I enjoyed that conversation so much that after that, whenever that any entrepreneur would call me that he wants his son or child to go to White Hat, it was natural for me. It was fun for me. And why it happens is that because Karan has just imbibed that in us as well. He never went. I have never been through any sales meeting or understand how the team sells, but the way Karan explains it, you just imbibe it, and that is the GTM. That is what is more important than anything else.
Nice, Pratik. We have crossed our time. I would probably ask one last question for both of you, Karan and Pratik. So this is a lot of behavior involved in this, right? As in human psyche is involved. Karan, one question is, do you have psychologists on your in your teams, or how did you go about this? And is there any great insight that you want to share other than the basic premise that parents want their kids to be successful? Any other human
No,
behavior or
in general, I would say the founder has to be incredibly detail oriented, right? Like I hate to use the word, but should be a micromanager in some ways, right? Which basically, so for me, for example, I think what happened was that till we hit product market fit, and it was very obvious, right? For me, the product market fit is net promoter score hits 50, right? The retention customers in the beginning, for example, in the first month of launching, we knew renewal rates were 10%. So we knew we had to do a lot. We added more classes, activities, projects after class, all of that stuff. Renewal rates are like renewal revenue starts to become equal to new revenue, right? Or at least the ratio of customers renewing are 70% plus. They're renewing the product as well as new users are coming. Till then, actually, there were only about 7 people in the company, right? So if I look at the journey of the company from October to April, there were only about 7 people in the company because I was doing I wanted to do everything, right? I was the one who was making the sales call. I was picking up the call center calls, and I remember people would come to my office and say, why are you not delegating call center calls and stuff? But it was very important for me to understand exactly how things are working here, right? The moment the product market fit hit, though, you just have to be the opposite, right? So I think this kind of counter is what you have to do, which is then you have to be basically the exact opposite, where I was just so uninhibited about scaling. Like in the lockdown, for example, we just went crazy, right? We went from 20 million to 40 to 80 to 100. We were adding thousands of people and I knew things were breaking all over. But I was like, this is what's going to happen, right? You have to be out of control here. You can't do anything. So we just kept kind of doubling. But till then, you have to be a real micromanager on. And even now, I think I look at every number every day, like 10 to 11 o'clock. I'm just like reviewing everything because, so I would say there's no big parent insight or psychologist or any of this stuff needed, right? What's needed is that the founder has done the sales calls himself, the first 100, 200 sales calls himself, understands what the objections are, understands the consumer well, has picked up the call center calls, has understood what's happening in the business under the hood. Then you're able to scale very fast and very easily, right? And even now, like I don't think there is anything in the business that I don't understand, right? In a level of depth, right? And that's very important, right? That's how the team stays completely on the ball, focused. Otherwise, yeah, like that's all I would say. You don't need too many fancy people around, to like run a business. So, yeah.
That's great, Karan. Karan, Pratik, want to ask you if it's okay to get 9 more minutes from you. There are a lot of questions from audience. If you're okay, I will try to.
Yeah, I blocked it. Yeah,
okay.
Sure.
Pratik, is it fine? Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks so much.
Yes.
So Karan, another question for you, Karan, because you're a solo founder, single founder, and also a non-tech founder, right?
Right.
And building a great tech company, which is nice. So can you tell us the challenges? And you were also micromanaging, right? Which is another way of running things. So did you ever feel that it would have been good to have a tech founder? Were you in this journey searching for a tech founder, or why did you go solo on this? What were you thinking?
I would still say that if you're a non-tech person, a tech founder would be very, very helpful, right? So I would say it's just the nature of things that I could not have one. I just chose speed, right? So when I came up with the idea, I just executed it, right? And I looked for, but it's not like you can find a tech founder just like in 1 month or something like that, right? So, but since the tech was so important to the company, I was also very patient in finding a great CTO. Till then I hacked we had a great hacker engineer like Anurag. He just hacked everything quickly. We got the product up quickly and we kept like doing it, but I waited for the CTO to come. But I would say actually it's good to be to have a tech founder, a tech co-founder, right? But having said that, if you don't have one, it's not the end of the world also. Like the thing is that you just, as I said, if you're going into the details and micromanage, actually, I didn't know any of this stuff, database architecture, all that kind of stuff, was completely unfamiliar territory for me. But I went into so much detail trying to understand everything that I was able to pick up a great CTO. So Pranab, like our CTO is exceptional, right? And I was able to pick him up because I just knew I'd understood tech well enough. I was able to understand the importance of tech. He understood the importance of tech for me, and I was able to sell him on my vision quickly.
Karan, I have a very different question because you're a non-tech founder. It just struck me. Did you take the course on White Hat Junior?
Do I take it myself?
Yeah.
Yeah, my daughter does it. She's 5 years old, so she does it. Our courses officially start from 6, but she takes it at 5, and it's really helpful. Very, very helpful.
But were you tempted to take the course for yourself sometime? Were you
Sorry.
were you tempted to take the course for yourself as well? As in, did you also want to learn coding, and did you sign up?
So the thing is that I, like in the beginning, as I said, I reviewed all the lessons till very late, till very late in the journey. Till April, I was reviewing the lessons, not commenting as much as just reviewing the integrity of what we were doing, like integrity of how it was going across the curriculum. So yes, I was quite involved in that in the beginning. Yeah.
Very nice. Very nice.
Yeah.
Karan, hiring a CTO is also not very easy, even if you're a tech founder. So can you tell us how did you go about hiring a CTO? Because while you learned a lot of things around tech, etc., how did you know that? How did you make the decision around the CTO? I know this has nothing to do with the GTM and.
Yeah. No, I think there are two parts to this, right? One is that in general, I think the founder has to be unbelievably focused on recruiting, right? So I would actually say till even last month, right? I would say 50% of my day was recruiting. I would just recruit like myself, right? COO, CTO, a head of product. I've recruited everybody, right? To the 2 levels down, right? I would have recruited or met everybody. It was very important to me to recruit, right? And I was interviewing a lot, right? Just you'd have to kiss a lot of frogs, right? So I did. So I think interviewing is very important, right? That's one. Like the practical part of this is that you should always have a tech person interviewing the CTO, right? So because obviously I would be able to judge it to a certain degree, and then after that you need to have a reliable tech person who interviews the CTO, right? So in that case we had it, and we were able to pick somebody who's technically very solid. Yeah.
Right. Current supply side and demand side is a very challenging one to keep up the speed of both, right? As in, while you want demand supply, right. You told me about how you went about getting good quality teachers and how you made sure the quality was good, the liquidity of them was good, etc. But there's a question for you. Did you go after supply first, or did you go after demand first, or how did you balance? And was there a time when you just had supply and not had it demand enough? And how did you go about this problem? Because it's a chicken and egg story most of the times, right? You need supply and demand,
right.
Otherwise the burn can go up to everything, right? So right. How did you go after this problem of supply and demand matching, and how did you solve it?
Yeah, great. So in our case, again, there are 2 points to it, right? One is I think org structure is a heavily under talked about thing, right? Part of the founder's job is, I would say, very hardcore HR stuff, right? Which is designing the org structure very solidly. I think I've seen a lot of founders don't spend as much time on that stuff, right? So right from the beginning, my swim lanes were very clear. From the time there were 7 people in the company to now there are 3,000 people in the company, the swim lanes of people have been very clear, right? That what are you doing exactly? So there was always a demand person and there was always a supply person, and you had very clear accountability on building supply, at the same time filling enough slots of the teacher. We always had very strong metrics that you add teachers when 85% of our slots are full, otherwise you're not adding teachers, right? And you should be unafraid of doing radical stuff, right? So for example, there was a period of time in festival when the cost of acquisition was too high, right? We put our entire teacher recruiting team into the teacher audits, right? Just auditing teachers and not adding more supply, right? So we've done pretty much at any given point of time, if we felt that the supply is too much because we are reducing acquisition because acquisition costs have gone too high, then we basically just deploy the team into a different activity and stuff. So we're doing this we've done this before. Yeah.
Right. Probably one last question that I would like to ask I would like to get insights both from Prateek and Karan. Yeah. How much do you think the market size or the TAM of EdTech has changed pre and post lockdown? And also some color on different categories within EdTech. Any thoughts on that? And which one do you expect to grow faster or slower now with the new world? Any thoughts on this?
I think go ahead. I think you'd have a much more deeper view of this. Yeah.
Yeah. So my perspective is, the TAM was always there. I think that we have just grown. We have just fast forwarded it by 4, 5, 6 years. We would have reached the place anyways after 6 years that we have reached today. So it's all the same. And now, from my perspective, I think there are many large companies being already built, and lots of money being put in K6 and K12. And in my mind, the opportunities there will require even sharper focus and even sharper entry point, because the generic, that the lower hanging fruits, or the generic use cases have probably been covered via investors in an academy as well. Uh, White Hat, Byju's, largest companies, and there are more companies as well. Now, in my mind, I'm personally very excited about continuing education. In my mind, it's just surprising that for the first 21 years, 22 years of your life, you go to school, and after you never go to school. It just I think something needs to be done on that front. I think I think for peer learning or for gamified learning, there'll be a lot of opportunities which is not as obvious right now. So I'm open to a lot of interesting ideas from that perspective. And I think suddenly now everyone has realized in this lockdown that online education is actually as good, or if not better, than offline education. So the shift has just moved faster. Beyond that, I'm sure best entrepreneurs will create the markets, and we just need to find the right entrepreneur.
Sure. Thanks, Pratik. Thanks. Pratik, one last question. Any adjacent businesses in EdTech that you think are yet to be solved? I know it's already a lot of crowd, a lot of noise around EdTech. Is there any problem that you would want startups to solve for? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, as I said, see, lots of so that we are still scratching the surface really. Even the largest companies are capturing only 1%, 2% of the market. We have a long way to go, and multiple multi-billion dollar companies will be created. In my mind, though, sitting here, I'll not say that I claim to know that this is the entry point for all of those verticals, and I'm sure it will come out. Every small niche could also be an entry point and then expand to a larger market. But some obvious open areas that I see is continuing education, gamification-based learning, peer-to-peer learning, doing based and outcome-based based learning for post-college or job learning, because most of the learning we have is theoretical. Can you do something together and then create outcomes? So I'm excited about some of these categories, but I don't want to be more top down. I want to be more bottoms up. Where when if I become top down, then I'll never keep White Hat in that system, right? It's important to be constantly learning from the ground.
Thanks so much, Pratik, Karan, for taking your time. I think everyone enjoyed the insights that you guys shared. Thanks so much.
Real pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks. I request all viewers to fill up the survey so that we can get better and get insights on how we can do things better. Thank you so much. Thanks, everyone.
Pleasure, everyone, and good luck to everyone. Thank you. Bye-bye.